So I'm David Durfee. I live in Shaftesbury and I represent Shaftesbury, Sunderland, and Glastonbury. We'll go around this way.
I'm Leland Morgan. I represent Grand Isle County and the western portion of the town of Milton.
Jed Lipsky, represent the Loyal One District South.
Michelle Boslin, Northern Windham County, Westminster, Rockingham, and Brookline.
Craig Burt and Bill Cabot.
Hi, John O'Brien. I represent Windsor Orange One, which is Royalton and Cambridge.
And we have two committee members who are joining us remotely.
Hi, Heather Supernut, Windsor 4, Barnard, Pomfret, Bridgewater, West Hartford.
Right, maybe having trouble muting. Okay. And Sidonia is our committee assistant. You can share any information with her if we ask for things you don't have and you want to follow up. I'll turn it over to you.
Great. I'm Emily Finnegan. I'm the district manager for Caledonia County Natural Resources Conservation District. And I'll ask the other folks here to introduce themselves and then get started.
Morning, I'm Julia, I'm the communications manager with the Vermont Association of Conservation.
Hi, I'm Richard Noel. I'm the chairman of the Franklin County District Soil Conservation Board. Acronyms to me are terrible. I'm a farmer along the Canadian border.
I'm Lauren Weston. I manage the Franklin County Natural Resources Conservation District.
Hi, Meg Post, Action Circles. I work at the conservation districts.
I'd like to add that I've been to dinner and meetings with several of these folks here in the recent past. Enjoyed it very much.
You brought back some information for the committee, I think.
Yes, I did.
Great.
Good stuff.
Jill.
Oh, yeah.
Good morning.
Jill?
I'm Jill Arachi, the Executive Director of the Vermont Association of Conservation Districts.
Morning, Jill.
And I live in Waitsfield.
All right. So Emily, if you want to get started, do we have this presentation on our website too? We do. Okay.
Great. Thank you for the opportunity to testify. We're really glad to be here today. Go ahead to the next slide. So today we're going to talk about conservation districts in general, our structure, our programming, and then the work we do related to state and federal partners. And we'll be reviewing our base appropriations request of $3 million to cover ongoing operational costs necessary to meet statutory obligations and why that funding is different than the funding we have now. So to start, conservation districts were established by the Soil Conservation Act in 1939. We are essentially county level government entities in a state with no county government. And we were established to be the state's conservation delivery system. And we connect people, organizations, and resources to steward our land and water resources for the future. We are a bottom-up, locally led, and we take a democratic approach to tackling natural resource issues in our areas. Go ahead to the next slide. So this chart is overwhelming, even for me. I think what's important to take from it is that we're down at the bottom of Vermont's 14 natural resource conservation districts. And this chart just sort of, to me, it illustrates the strength of our partnerships and the partnerships we have with the State Natural Resources Conservation Council, which is in the center there. And then we have the Vermont Association of Conservation Districts, which is a 501c3 that works for us and with us. And then we have our partnership with the USDA Natural Resource Conservation Service. So federal, state agency, NRCC is actually established to be an agency of the state. And the landowners, farmers, municipalities, public at the bottom. So I think what's also key about this diagram is that, we sort of serve as this hub for landowners, farmers, municipalities, and the public to connect them to all these other state agencies and federal and state partners. Okay, next slide. So we are all over the state of Vermont. You can see the colors are the different basins, watersheds, and then the white lines represent conservation district boundaries. So you can see that some of the boundaries are on watershed lines-ish, and some of them are on a county basis, countywide basis. And I think what's unique about our structure is that we are all over the state of Vermont. There's no area that is that is not served by a conservation district.
These,
Um,
are these districts mapped out in statute? They're defined this way in statute?
Oh, good question. I think they are not. Yeah, in the statute, it directs, it says how to make a conservation district. And then each area, I think, was set up their own conservation district. Yeah, it's a little, the statute is old. Yeah. We were, the Caledonia Natural Resources Conservation District was established in 1946. 1939 was the first one. That was Poultney Meadowy Natural Resources Conservation District. So yeah, the boundaries were established a long time ago.
If I may.
Yeah.
The statute does lay out how a group of landowners is able to create their own conservation district. It does walk through that process in the statute.
Representative O'Brien.
Was it meant to follow county lines originally, or is that just sort of a guideline? Because is it more coincidental that they're 14?
No, yes, I think so. Yeah. Yeah, and I work in the Northeast Kingdom where all of them are county based, so that's in my head, they're all county based, but they're not actually. There's several, especially in this part of the state down here, like the southwest part of the state that are watershed based.
Okay.
Great. I think what's important to take from this here is that districts are designed to meet local needs. So our efforts are really focused in a very small area. We don't cover like the whole state, which is pretty true of many of the state and federal partners state partners that we work with. And because of that, we can build these really strong relationships in our communities. I'm interviewing for another position right now at the Caledonia District, and someone asked me how we got projects, and I sort of was like racking my brain. How do we get projects? I guess there's a database, there's people we work with, but mostly it's because people know who we are and they come to us and ask us about things, towns and landowners. So that's how we get projects. We build strong relationships in the communities that we're in. And then we also make decisions based on what our priorities are as well, and what projects are fundable. I think, yeah. And so in general, we act as these sort of like resource navigators for towns, landowners, and farmers, helping them access state and federal sources of funding. And I'm going to turn it over to Lauren from the Franklin County Conservation District.
Yeah, again. So yes, I'm Lauren Weston. I manage the Franklin County Natural Resources Conservation District. Just a couple other pieces to build on is that natural resources conservation districts exist across the entire United States. There's over 3,000 conservation districts in every state and territory of the United States. So we're 14 of over 3,000, which is really exciting. And we work in a variety of areas. I am going to focus a bit on what we do in agriculture, given all of you. And so we are able to help farmers in many ways. We go onto farms in a non-regulatory fashion. So when we go onto farms, everything that happens is voluntary that the farmer is interested in doing. We can go in and act as a sort of intermediary between regulators and the farms as well to help them access resources. One of the things that you'll be handed today is a guide to assistance for agricultural producers. And there's over, I believe, 130 pages of grants and programs that farmers can access, and we help them navigate all of them. We also try to make it easy by putting it all in one guide. Some of the other things that we do include natural resources conservation and restoration. So that's like dam removals, tree plantings, stream restoration, and then there's stormwater remediation. Obviously, in the more urban areas, that's kind of the what's really needed by those communities, and so those conservation districts do that work. And then we also love to do education and outreach with our communities to really bring everybody onto the same page and have great outdoor experiences a lot of the time. Go ahead. So a lot of what we do is related to the Clean Water Act. I am in Franklin County, which is on Lake Champlain. So we have a lot of work to do in the Lake Champlain total maximum daily load for phosphorus. And one of the proudest things that we have to share is that over 80%, 87% of the overall estimated reductions for phosphorus for that TMDL in fiscal year 24 came from the agriculture sector. So the work that we're doing with farmers is really having a positive impact on the lake, and we're doing great things. We also get to use some of the funds that come through DEC or ANR and DEC to do other types of clean water projects. Several of us are members of the Basin Water Quality Councils that is helping deliver a lot of that clean water project funding. And we are able to accomplish a lot of great work with all of that. Sorry, go ahead.
Representative O'Brien has a question.
So if the money flows, say, from ANR, DEC, or NRCS, are you like the fiscal agent then for a farm who wanted to do a stormwater remediation or some sort of phosphorus reduction?
Great question. We are often the project manager for a lot of these projects. So we'll write the competitive grant application for the project, and then we'll get landowner agreements in place to be the facilitator for those projects. If the farmer is working through NRCS, sometimes we can connect them to NRCS for the first time, but then they typically work directly with their NRCS planner. Some conservation districts do have their own planners that function almost exactly like NRCS planners as well.
So similar in some ways almost to the regional planning commissions to towns, like,
Yes.
Tunbridge, right, we'll use Two Rivers in our case, to be like a project manager like that.
Yes, exactly.
And same with farmers working with the Agency of Agriculture. We can connect them to the Agency of Agriculture, but we don't hold money in that case. We're not a project manager.
Okay.
Which actually gives us a pretty unique perspective on farms, where we're going in, we don't have money to give them, and we don't have any enforcement to do for them. So we get to come be the good guys and really help them navigate whatever system they're going through. Sometimes they'll call us in if they have had an enforcement action against them and they need help accessing resources to fix the issue, which we actually really love to do, because usually it's pretty clear, here's what you got to do, and we can go get them money for it. So yes. And the end of that, where Jill's faces says since 2016, just so you all know, with the 14 districts, we're able to do a lot of work on the ground through the competitive grants that we get and all the opportunities that we have. However, we could be doing a lot more work if we had additional base funding for our operations and to be fulfilling our statutory obligations. And so even with the funds that we've been able to secure since 2018 or 2016, I apologize, over 17,000 soil, manure, and water quality samples, which is incredible if you think about how many farms are left in Vermont. We're really working with most of them. I think that's good for that slide if you'd like to move on. And so our request that we're bringing to you today is for $3 million in base funding for our operations and administrative costs. And so that would be split between all 14 districts and the Natural Resources Conservation Council, which again is our state agency that oversees us. And we'll be benefiting all those lovely people with smiling faces. You can go to the next slide.
Representative O'Brien.
So Lauren, what's your base now?
Currently, we have $612,000, and last year we got $100,000 in one-time funding additionally. The governor's budget shows us down to $500,000 for this coming year. So a reduction of what we had last year, which is still more than we have had probably 5 years ago. I think we were closer to $112,000 between all 14 districts and a state agency. So we're really just trying to catch back up from chronic underfunding. Which actually I think is exactly what that slide said. Great. Love when that happens. So we're really hoping to get these additional funds. We have the capacity to put them to work on the ground immediately in fiscal year 26, should we receive them. Any amount of money that we're able to gain from the state would be would receive a huge return on investment by the federal dollars that we're able to leverage for our communities and for our farmers. Next slide. So here are some of the ways we want to use that $3 million. One way is to make sure that each of the 14 districts have one completely paid for full-time staff member. At this point in time, not all districts have a full-time district manager. So there is some inconsistency across the state with the services that are being able to be offered. And we would really like to be able to be a consistent, stable voice for our communities. We'd also love to keep all of the staff that we have now, that we've put a lot of effort into training, and make sure that there's real viable careers here. Because as Emily mentioned, the projects that happen are based on relationships. People don't reach out to people they don't know and ask them to do something on their land. You really have to have that trust to make this all work. We would also like to be able to continue to support our supervisors, of which Richard Noel is one of mine, to continue to serve on the boards for the conservation districts, who are democratically elected in our own elections in each district. And it is a prestigious position, but it does take a lot of time. Richard can tell you that. He's actually been on our board for over 45 years. So, and then additionally, part of our statutory obligation is to really be a community engagement center. And so we really want to make sure we're meeting the needs of our communities and being able to understand what they need through a lot of community outreach and education. One of the ways we implemented that this year is we did a survey between the Franklin, Grand Island, Lamoille counties, and we actually got 142 responses to an online survey, which is pretty good. And the main thing that people really wanted more of in order to get change happening on the ground was more community buy-in, which just takes more time out with people, meeting them where they are and really sharing the information that we have. We also just are organizations that need technology and software, and don't have any ways of paying for that really right now. And increased capacity at the State Natural Resources Conservation Council is also included in that $3 million budget request. You can go ahead. Okay. So we have 14 conservation districts now. We're doing great work on the ground through competitive grants. The only core funding that we have is the $612,000 from last fiscal year, which works out to a little over $35,000 per district, which is not very much money. We really need this base funding so that we don't have to constantly be writing grants, applications, and constantly reporting on all of the grants, so that we can really do the community engagement work and fulfill our statutory obligations that competitive project-based grants do not allow you to do. So we're able to slowly over time get a lot of work done, but we're not quick and responsive, and we can't really play the role we should be playing based on our statutory obligations.
Lauren, I just wondered if you ever added up how much you bring in a year in grants from the 14?
From the 14, I have the number for myself. I don't have it for the 14. I bet Jill does.
Yes, it's about 4 to 5 million, depending on the year. This past year, Conservation Districts, VACD, and Council jointly wrote up over 150 grants to bring in the funding that they have. Of course, it takes time to get the grant agreement. Some of those will play out in future years. It will be multi-year grants.
That was funding for the conservation districts?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
The other thing I wondered is, you ever total up how much money you bring in, for the various projects, so farmers or not-for-profits? That would be really interesting.
It would be very interesting. Even that, let's just say 5 million, even that 5 million, a large proportion of it is passed through to contractors for clean water projects that are funded by the Clean Water Fund through DEC. The work that districts do in ag is mostly navigation and technical assistance needs assessment. And conservation districts are essential to the Natural Resources Conservation Service. And I think that we tend to under articulate how important we are to NRCS. And they get out, I don't even just in the Environmental Quality Incentives Program, about $12 million a year to farmers, directly to farmers.
And so I did say I had my own numbers for my district. I'm currently managing 35 grants for 8 full-time staff, and I have 11 that I've already applied for that I haven't heard back from. So that's kind of the scale that one district is working on, which is, quite a lot of work for sometimes not enough return. Just to keep the doors open and doing this good work.
Chairman Durfee.
Representative Nelson.
Yeah, thank you. Anecdotally, we work very closely with the Orleans County Conservation District at Nelson Farms, and we find them an invaluable resource to help us navigate the new monies available through the Farm Bill and whatnot, and to best apply these monies to ensuring clean water quality. The emphasis always has been clean water. And Sarah, Damsel, and Ted are just absolutely wonderful to work with, and keep us to task and keep us moving forward with everything. But it is a lot of work. They put in a lot of work on administrating these programs, and as I'm sure the other counties do as well. So, and I can't believe that we don't see the value in that. Anyway, that's it for now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Representative O'Brien.
Just Representative Nelson reminded me. So sometimes when there's a grant and you're a project manager, are you entitled to, like the 25% for administration and the way like FEMA and MERP grants and things like that come through municipalities?
Yes. So each grant has different limitations. I believe until this year, the negotiated indirect rate that was allowable on most federal grants was 10%. I think now it's been moved to 15%, which is insufficient. So we are able to bill for that and also our time, but usually we have to very clearly justify how we got to our billable rate, and makes it hard to grow and retain staff when you're playing with numbers that are that tight. Yeah. Yeah. Thanks. Now back to Emily. Thank you very much.
I just want to clarify a few things before I get going. So what we were saying before, that $5 million that Jill was talking about, depending on the year, as she said, and I would say in most years, so much of that just goes right out the door to engineers and subcontractors for construction. Our budget, we have been doing stormwater projects in the last couple of years, and our budget can look huge, but like $300,000 of that is not, we're not keeping that. And then another thing I wanted to clarify when we were talking about the indirect rate is that districts, because of their status as municipalities, can technically apply for both FEMA grants and NRCS like EWP grants, which maybe you had heard about more after the flooding. They're basically like NRCS, towns typically apply to do bank stabilization. That's generally what EWP is used for property protection. Conservation districts could technically apply for those as well, just like a town could. Most of us tend to shy away from both of those types of grants because they're federal, very difficult to manage, take a lot of administration, and wouldn't pay us well enough, basically. So I think that's another important thing to emphasize with this base funding, is that it would allow us to leverage more of those dollars. There's plenty of towns in Caledonia County, at least that I know of, that could potentially do more FEMA work, but won't because of all the administration involved. And if they had a conservation district coming to them saying, hey, we could manage this grant on behalf of XYZ landowner to do a bank stabilization, I think at least the couple towns that I work with, they'd be like, yes, please, take that away from us. So so this slide is just about the relationship between natural resource conservation districts and NRCS. So we've touched on this a little bit. But I think the important thing to clarify here is that the federal government support does not include like salary, benefits, staff, travel reimbursements, equipment, and depending on the conservation district, it may not even include these things like office space and technology. And that's, you know, that's a choice that both the conservation district and NRCS have made at some point in time. At least for the Caledonia district, we are in the St. Johnsbury office. We use federal computers and we use their office space and printers and cars and things like that. And that's really useful to us, but it's far below what the services that we're actually providing for them in terms of outreach and connecting landowners to NRCS programs. At the Caledonia district, we actually have a person on staff who does half of their time basically planning for NRCS through a grant through Vermont Association of Conservation Districts. So she's 0.5 FTE doing that. And what's really unique and great about that is that she has this like deep knowledge of NRCS because she does it. She like does the planning for NRCS, but can also spend the time because of other grant sources we have to connect those producers to other state and nonprofit resources that can sort of like round out a whole conservation project. Often something that a producer is going to do isn't fully addressed by NRCS, or like could be parts of it could be better addressed by another funding source. And Taylor can really like take all of those into consideration and direct the producer to the services that might work best for their particular project.
How many NRCS offices are there around the state? I know there's not
Seven?
one in.
7+ state, Lauren says. I believe her.
There's 7 NRCS office plus
Yeah.
one state office.
A state office, and does each of them host a conservation district office space wise?
Most do.
We outgrew our.
It seems, yeah, I think what I would highlight from that is that the space is really limited. So we have 2 desks and there are no more available. So, you know, I'm going to hire a 3rd staff person, but it's on the contingency that they'll telework and share a desk with me, essentially. So many districts are starting to outgrow their federal spaces and there's no, just because of actual building constraints, there's no option to add more. So that's the other thing that, you know, this base operational funding would be really useful in supporting, is if districts need to expand out of their office space in order to truly meet the needs of their community. You know, that costs a lot of money to rent a building and do all the things related to renting a building, which Lauren knows everything about and I know nothing about. Franklin District is not in their USDA office anymore.
And
Yeah.
just looking through the bullet points
Yeah.
and the statement at the end, there's nothing about the relationship in Vermont between the districts and the Conservation Service that's different than other states. This is.
No, I think it's a state by state, and actually each district has their own MOU, and we call it a memorandum of understanding and an unfunded cooperative agreement. The MOU exists for all districts, pretty sure, and the unfunded cooperative agreement is specifically related to equipment and office space, things like that.
I guess what I was getting at is, in other states, is the federal government
Yeah.
supplying actual support in terms of salary or?
I don't know.
You know, in some states, it's the state, and it's even through taxes.
Yeah,
In the Chesapeake area, it's valued, a position on a district board is something that people actually vie for and work for because of the influence they can have to help their water systems to clean up the Chesapeake Bay.
yeah.
And in certain parts of the country, if I was told, I'm telling you, I'm the board chairman, and whoa, not here. Whoa, like stopping a horse up here.
Yeah, I think, and we have some more details on this, but I think that in many other states, conservation districts are funded by county and state taxes, or their county level employees, or, you know, when I explain conservation districts to people, I like to say, like, there's no they. Like, we're a conservation district. We have a board of supervisors. Like, they're my supervisor, and we're just our own little entity trying to raise money and do what we want to do, you know? So if that answers your
Let's
question.
keep going.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, so the elephant in the room, the impacts of the federal funding cuts. It varies by district, but in general, we help bring federal funding to the natural resources community. And we are impacted by the frozen IRA and BIL funds. Yesterday, I got an email that the BIL funds are not frozen, at least for my projects. But the IRA, I believe, are still frozen. And that staff person that I was speaking of before, she's funded by a mix of funding sources, but there is some IRA funding in her salary as well.
Representative O'Brien?
Just following up on the chair's line of questioning.
Yeah.
Are there some states, I know we have probably the weakest county government system in the whole country, but are there certain states where because the funding's so threadbare that they've just gone away or they've,
Conservation district?
yeah, or they've just been?
I don't think so. I think they just, well, until the early 2000s, conservation, you know, it's only in the last 20 years that I think that our conservation districts in Vermont have had more robust full-time staff, and not even. And I think in the last 5 years, I think we've added 34 FTE, I think is what our handout says. And we could add more. I think the base funding increase that has already happened, it sort of allowed me to feel okay hiring folks, because more of my salary was then supported by unrestricted funding, and I was able to pass, sort of spread around the project and program-based funding to a staff person. So it's really important in making districts and district managers feel like they can support staff on projects rather than supporting themselves on projects and staff on projects, right? Yeah, I mean, that's all there is to say about that. So this is just a list from our annual report of NRCD and VACD results. I think the example I wanted to share is a farm in Danville that my staff person worked with, Lucky Hill Farm. They are a dairy, over 100 cows, I believe. And they had a very old nutrient management plan. Nutrient management planning is something that we have a lot of involvement with in terms of establishing plans and maintaining them on behalf of producers. So they had a super old plan in Go Crop, this program where the plans live. And Taylor spent many hours helping them update that plan. In the process, realized that they had a bunch of corn silage fields and they weren't actually cover cropping them. And sort of through the process of establishing that relationship, the farmer decided to cover crop them. And in 2024, they applied for the FAP program through the Vermont Agency of Agriculture and cover cropped. And next year they're going to apply for NRCS and do the same thing, do cover cropping. So Taylor helped them realize that there was grant sources available to help them try it out, and not put all that effort into something and not have it pay out. And they had never applied for grants before that, ever. So I think that's a really good example of like the way that we can establish a relationship in time with someone, and apply and help them apply for funding to cover crop. So, yeah, and she asked her yesterday if she could use her as an example, and it was yes, absolutely. It's a ringing endorsement if I've ever heard one. You can go ahead to the next slide. I'm pretty sure that's the last one. That's the last. Richard's back.
Before you
Yeah, shoot.
take away, just see if there's any questions.
Oh, yeah.
No, okay.
Yes. I have to sit. I like to stand. I sit. Don't feel right unless I'm on a stool. Anyway, I'm Richard Noel, Richard J. Noel. The reason I use the J because there's another Richard Noel in Franklin County, and we sometimes get our bills confused, and that's not good. I'm the chair of the Franklin County District Conservation Board. I've been on the board for 45 years, but in the last 5 years, things have changed tremendously. With the mandates that the state has put for clean water, and we have the staff now, which has done a tremendous job with implementing these plans and we are the boots, we are your worker bees. You put the project out there, our manager bids for it, and then they get it done, send you the deliverables, and that's how we get paid. Right now, with the amounts that we were talking about, 35,000 each, we spend 20,000 a month on employees because projects want to get done. You want to get done. We can't do it with just one or two people. We've outgrown our association with the Natural Resource Conservation because there was no more room. Now we're in a rented building. Hopefully someday we can own our own building and facilitate helping farmers even more. But with the bureaucracy that's coming down, and I'm kind of glad I'm not farming this way anymore because I don't work well with bureaucracy. Sorry. I'm not a paper person. I'm just not good in that. I'm just not good. I apologize. But these ladies, our group can help a farmer. Okay, there's a project that needs to be done, tied to clean water, do some land soil retention. They can coordinate with our group. They do the grant work. They help facilitate that job. And they help the farmer in all actuality, what the state wants to get accomplished. And that's what I find what's changed a lot in the last 4 or 5 years. We were at one time just a board that advised soil conservation. They would come to us and say, oh, so-and-so wants to do this project on his farm. What do you think? And we give our okays. We even gave the permissions to do not dam projects. To do pits. There was a permission process and we did that. But at the time, we were all boots on the ground farmers. And that's where that little comment about per diem, we're getting the same thing we were getting 40 years ago. Come on, please.
Like fire wardens.
Yeah, and a farmer, if there's actually I'm the last farmer on that board. I'm the last farmer in 370 years in my group of people that came from France. It's sad to me, it's hard. But anyway, we have to keep in these days, in these times, with price fluctuations, you keep us. If you don't even follow COLA, cost of living, we're going backwards. We can't accomplish that point and accomplish not just for the salaries and what you pay these people, for what you want done out there. Give us the funds, give the project, give us the funds, we'll do the work. Give us the project, no fund, we can't do the work. Bottom line. I don't know what you want. Go ahead, fire some questions at me.
All right. Well, we won't fire them at you. We'll somewhere between firing and lobbing softball questions.
Okay. Well, we'll do like my father did in World War II. Certain enemies he was working with. Yeah, they'd throw their grenades at us. We'd pull the pins and throw them back.
Representative O'Brien.
So just a hypothetical, let's say there's former dairy farm out of business.
Yes.
500 goat dairy wants to come in. They need a nutrient management plan.
Yeah.
And AAFM is telling them that, right? Mm-hmm. Would that farmer then turn to the conservation districts to figure out how and then the conservation districts work with the Agency of Ag?
Yes.
Make sure.
Back when I was farming full time, I did it myself. To me, it's very cost effective. You find out what your soil needs, you balance it with fertilizers that'll feed that need, and actually you save money in the long run. But now it's become something that's, and I can see why it's required. Some farmers didn't do that. They need, okay, we threw on 500 pounds of triple 15. Well, so did you need it? Well, that's the way I always did it. But now the new generation is learning, they even do it with spot spraying. They even do it with planters that will plant more in a certain area because it'll grow better. This is the evolving thing and what the younger generation is starting to need, because that's what they've learned. And they're good ideas.
And just to build on that too, so a farm could elect to pay for a private consultant to do their plan for them, which is a for-profit business, or they could, typically we work with the small farms and the certified small farms who have less financial flexibility. So we'll do their nutrient plan with them for free. We'll also do their soil samples and help them with their manure samples. They might have to pay for the lab test, but a lot of districts will do the labor for free. So, and in cooperation with UVM Extension as well, they are an invaluable partner, or valuable partner. I always say that backwards.
There was a project done on my old farm. I have a retirement farm. I got 45 acres, but my old farm was 300 acres, but it was the center of a 2,800 acre watershed. I had 2 miles of ditch system. And we fenced it off. When we do the actual row crop, we'd stop within a certain amount of feet. Because it just didn't make sense to me. Why would I want to put my dirt down the ditch and then the neighbor would end up with it? Or it'd end up in the river, which would end up in the lake. We could see it on my farm. We fenced it off. I put it in land trust in 95. I didn't want to see it developed. It's farm. I want to see it stay a farm. We fenced off the waterways, everything now. We have no row crops. It's all grass and it's organic. And the farmer that's bought it is organic and uses the farm for just grassland, for his grass needs. But all these things were already started and in place. And there's been many programs that the Schwingers have done that our district has helped them implement to keep that goal of clean water. You can very visibly see it on my farm. I've got a row crop farm over here. I got an organic farm over here. I'll show you my ditches. The water blends in. You go over here. How come it's kind of chocolatey? Well, it's the soil coming down the pike, coming down the way. Then it weaves around and ends up down in the river, which ends up down in the lake. We've also done programs. We had suspended skidder bridges for a while. It wasn't cost effective, but now we've gone back into it. And what is it, $100?
$100 a month to rent a portable skidder bridge from district.
Which some now loggers have learned, and also some of them have been slapped on their hands that, hey, you shouldn't be crossing through these rivers and ditches to haul your logs out. Here's what you can do. And we're fine with that. It's not a permanent crossing. It's while logging season, which is in the winter when ground is froze, you come through, then you pull the bridge up.
You can do one more slide if you want to switch these.
I'm sorry, before you do that,
Yeah.
Representative Morgan had a
I
question.
just had are the temporary, the rentals, are they metal bridges?
No,
Heavy duty wood?
heavy duty wood, usually 8x8s.
Yeah, they've gone.
Jed knows what they are.
12,
10x12 now.
Because the 8x8s.
Yeah, they
are
break up.
training mats. But they're generally 20 feet long and they're.
So it takes some pretty good size equipment to drive it into place.
Yeah, it's a- you drive-
77,000 machines.
Yeah, you drag it through with your skidders. And of course, you have to have these 8x12s because the skidders have the skidder chains on them with spikes on them that long. And they'll beat the crap out of them.
Yeah,
If you got enough lumber.
they have a lifespan.
Yes, you have a lifespan.
A few seasons.
But the goal is to keep the skidders from going through the water system, loosening up the dirt, which starts going down the street.
Richard, thank you.
You're welcome.
And the Forest Parks and Rec, Dave Wilcox actually helped facilitate the building of those bridges that we're renting out these days, as well. And so I guess formally, we would like to ask, for your group to, include the $3 million request in your budget memo to House Appropriations is, our request today.
I think there's a couple of other documents posted that came in from you this morning or yesterday. One of them is specific to the budget request?
It is.
Right, okay.
Yes.
I'm wondering whether, just to that point, you could say something about the existing dollar amount for this year. Like, it's an odd number, so I'm not going to try and quote it, but how much of that goes directly to the 14 districts? How much of it goes to the association or the collective?
So,
Yeah.
yes, Jill might also hop on, but each district this year received $35,500. So that times 14. It's not a math I can do in my head quickly, but the remainder went to NRCC to support their operations.
And NRCC
is the state agency, the Natural Resources Conservation Council.
Conservation Council, okay.
Yes.
Okay. I said association earlier, but that's.
We also have an association of conservation districts, and that is a nonprofit arm that has honestly kind of stepped up to help fill some of the gaps of the unfunded NRCC and underfunded NRCC for the past several years.
It's challenging, even for me, it's a challenge to remember the different acronyms this situation. If $3 million were budgeted, how would that be distributed? Or was
Yes.
able to speak to that?
I know that Jill can.
14 districts, 35,000, 490,000.
Jill, would you like to speak to the specifics of the request?
Sure. I don't have the memo right in front of me. I am pulling it out because it's actually in that memo. Our goal was to support, I think that as was in an earlier slide, a minimum of one full-time position, basically the district manager position, but it may be divided amongst multiple positions. And if I remember correct, so that ended up at about 180,000 roughly per district. We allowed districts to submit proposals about what their priorities were. So it was a little more than one FTE that supported other critical essential needs. And then basically it's for council. So the association's job is mostly to help with representation and capacity building for the districts. And then in the past, because council was working on revitalizing, VACD was managing grants that were passing through to the districts. But at this point, the state funding all goes through council, almost all of it, to the districts. And these are the grants that districts get are Clean Water Fund grants. We're looking for this general operational funds to allow districts to fill a broader set of mandate and have flexibility. And then there's about, if I remember correctly, roughly 300,000 for council staff. And I may not be exactly right in those numbers because I don't have it right in front of me, but and those are the staff that would oversee these grants and also provide capacity building support to districts as well as oversight. So council is the link. Council is composed of state agency representatives as well as conservation district representatives. They're the oversight entity for conservation districts. So part of that is basically grant management, and part of it is the statutory responsibility of council to oversee the districts. The stronger council is, the stronger our districts can be. Because we're working, for example, we do things like the grant manager has a role of ensuring that the districts get trained in whatever the program it is that they're implementing. Let's say nutrient management planning, for example. You know, we have trainings for the district staff so that they understand their role and they're well trained. So the council has a sort of a quality control role within the system, and it provides the link to the state.
Sorry to interrupt there, John. So
No,
currently, does the council need to do fundraising of its own, or is it funded entirely by the districts?
Great question. So when I came on 14 years ago, and honestly, until 4 years ago, I believe it was, districts and council collectively got 112,000 through this grant, through the Agency of Ag. And basically, council hardly existed. And council also gets overhead on grants the same as VACD does, and that's how it funds itself. So districts, as you've heard, are overwhelmed with the amount of administrative work required by all these grants. And so is council and VACD, so are council and VACD, of trying to, be efficient in the systems of the grant management we do, right? So we give subgrants to districts for all the programs we help fund through districts. They have to report to us. We compile the reports and send them up to the funder. So there's a lot of grant administration on both for the districts and for council and VACD.
Yeah.
It's quite burdensome. It's very time consuming.
I can imagine it's burdensome, and it's a skill set. I mean, so it takes time. Yes, I acknowledge that, but you're asking somebody to be good at grant writing and good at actually doing the work that statute and the federal, code envision.
Right.
Yeah, and probably not for a lot of compensation. I would have. So.
That would be a correct assumption. Yes.
And I am pulling up the budget now. I do have it in front of me now. The request. And it looks like roughly 400,000 for council out of that 3 million.
Okay,
And that's in one of your handouts.
yeah.
I'm just gonna pull it up.
Representative O'Brien, you have a question?
Yeah, it'd be fascinating if you could ever sort of figure out what the multiplier was for FTE, because say like in Tunbridge, we finally hired a grants manager coming out of COVID. And that position, has brought in so much more money because we could finally manage, BRIC grants or MERC grants or ARPA money, et cetera. And so I would assume the same thing happens here, where you could turn that 3 million, leverage it almost into double that money if you had that capacity.
So I'll say
Absolutely.
for the Franklin, Grand Island, Memorial districts last year, again, each receiving 35, we were able to work through a process with the NRCS to implement a pool of $1.5 million for those 3 counties, for farmers just in those 3 counties. So that's not the full picture, but that's one example. Like we have the trusted relationships with the funders that if we can make a good case, they are inclined to hear our voices.
And I think what's important about that process is that it's funded with that $35,000. We don't have another grant to support us to get to that 1.5 million pool. It's directly exactly what you're talking about. Like that's what we can multiply it into. And for one example, that's just one example.
Yeah.
Representative Burke?
Are the grants that you're receiving through all this amazing work you guys are doing, are those mostly federal dollars that are coming in?
It's a great mix of federal, state, and private funds. So it's actually a pretty diversified pool. I don't know the exact percentages. I know my particular district right now is 26% federally funded because I needed that number when things were freezing. So I know that one off the top of my head, but it definitely ranges by district. And I think too, there's the funding for the staff projects and there's the funding for the contractors. Which can really skew.
Depends on how you do the percentage.
Yeah, it can really skew how you're viewing things.
Regardless of the source, private, federal, state, other, you need to proactively go after the money. None of it is just handed to you.
No, they're all competitive grants.
Yeah.
Yes, they're all competitive grants. Some are less competitive than others, but they're all still. You have to know what you're doing when you're applying for them, for sure. They won't fund you if it's a bad proposal. We've learned that lesson a couple times.
One other thing, thinking about the skidder bridges, did some of the districts own like manure injectors that you loaned out?
Yes, some districts have equipment rental programs, including manure injectors, aerators, no-till seed drills, a variety of things. Yes, which are often free to farmers. I've heard great things. In Franklin County, we don't have any of the equipment because UVM Extension has the exact same equipment for our region. But I know Poultney Meadowy has several pieces of equipment that they keep buying more. So I assume that it's going well.
Relates us.
We've had in Franklin County, these manure injection systems that are hooked up to, I don't know how we would explain it, these big hoses that come from the pit. We have a farmer in our town that pumps 2 miles to another, but it's eliminated road traffic. His truck's running the road, and he gets his crops in sooner. So after all the costs are figured out, it's profitable. And you have gained these other things of less runoff, less running on the roads and destroying the roads, and putting that dirt in the ditch, which ends up in the streams, which ends up in the lake. So there's cost involved, but there's also I do it business minded. There's a return. Do you have a return to be able to pay off this cost? Then it's worth it. Plus, you get the environmental benefits. The winner.
It is.
So thank you. I just wanted to ask while you're all here, is there a new federal appointee for NRCS in place? Would you know? I don't know whether you work with that person regularly enough to know.
In Vermont, at the state level, the state conservationists are career directors. There has been some discussion of those becoming political appointees. In Vermont, the Farm Service Agency and the Rural Development Directors are political, nationwide, are political appointees. NRCS Central has an acting chief right now. And then there is a Secretary of Agriculture who's expected to perhaps be cleared by the Senate maybe this week.
Thank you. Yeah, I was mixing up the three different, yeah.
Yes.
All right. Well, thank you for coming in. I think this has been really helpful background testimony, and we will be considering all the different budget requests and may reach out if we need any more information.
Well, thank you very much for your time today. We appreciate it and your questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Before we break for lunch, committee, and before we go off live, is there anything anybody needs to mention to the committee? We'll be back at 1. Here between 1 and 3 again today.
Did we find that one-time 100,000 for them last year? Where did that go?
So I think that ultimately there was, I don't know if it was part of the waterfall, but at the end of the year when we left, in a number of cases, when we were budgeted for the budget last June, we said, if it turns out there's additional revenue, apply it to these programs in this order.
Mhm.
And so I think that, yeah, I'm getting some nods that was the case. Yeah. All right. Well, everyone have a nice lunch.